The National Desk, America's News Now.
More severe weather forecast today in the Northeast after storms left a trail of destruction from Texas to Pennsylvania, where flooding is most likely tonight.
It's, just expensive.
The economy will be top of mind for voters this November. How much you're paying for everyday essentials as compared to 2020. And billions of dollars of student debt being canceled. How many borrowers have been impacted so far, and how to know if you qualify for the latest round of relief. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. The severe weather system that's dumped record amounts of rain on the South and the Ohio Valley hitting the Northeast today and putting more than 50 million Americans under flood or wind alerts. Moderate to heavy rain we're talking about that's forecast along the Appalachians and also the lower Great Lakes. And the most intense weather is expected in New England, where flooding is most likely through the rest of the weekend. In towns from Texas to Pennsylvania still cleaning up from flooding and tornado damage this week. You can see it right there. Hundreds of thousands of power outages have been resolved. More severe weather threatening to reach the southern plains and Midwest on Monday and Tuesday. Tornadoes, damaging wind gusts, and large hail are all possible. In Dallas today, one student hospitalized and one person in custody in a shooting on school grounds at the Wilmer Hutchins High School. Officials say there is no longer an active threat on campus. At this time, it is not known who was taken into custody or the condition of the student who was shot. And one Memphis police officer, Joseph McKinney, is dead tonight, while two other officers are hurt after they were shot responding to a suspicious vehicle call overnight. Take a closer look at that slain officer. McKinney had joined the department back in 2020. Tonight, his wife and family grieving over this catastrophic loss. When McKinney and his colleagues approached that suspicious vehicle, two suspects inside fired shots at officers, who then returned fire on them. One of the suspects in that vehicle, an 18-year-old, died. The other, a 17-year-old, is in critical condition. Police say the 18-year-old who died was previously arrested by them in March, found in a stolen vehicle with an illegal modified semi-automatic weapon. The additional two injured officers are said to be in stable condition. But so far in the year 2024, these are the stats. At least 35 law enforcement officers across the country have been killed in the line of duty. 12 of them have been killed by gunfire. And one dead, 13 injured, with the suspect, Clellan Parker, in custody after an 18-wheeler tractor trailer crashed into a Texas Department of Public Safety office in Brenham, just about 70 miles northwest of Houston. Authorities believe the crash was intentional and that the truck was stolen. Texas Rangers still investigating, but say there is no additional threat at this time. Days after failing to renew FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the House passed a reauthorization of the heavily debated measure, 273 to 147. Still, 59 Republicans and 88 Democrats voted against this bill, and it included a heated back and forth over a separate measure to require a warrant for any data collection on Americans, period. It gained support from the far right and the far left, but ultimately it failed.
Holy cow! Pretty soon this is going to be everybody gets to get searched for any darn reason they want. That's not how it works in America, at least not how it's supposed to work.
702 is about collecting data and information on foreigners abroad. You have to be both. You have to be a foreigner and you have to be abroad.
Critics of FISA claim it gives the FBI the ability to surveil not just foreign adversaries, but also American citizens, because Americans' data gets swept up in queries. This authorization is only for 2 years, not 5, and now it heads to the Senate. FISA expires next Friday if it does not reach President Biden's desk before then. The U.S. has issued an alert warning against any travel to Israel and the West Bank as we learn the Pentagon has moved additional assets to the Middle Eastern region. This as we wait for Iran to retaliate to a strike that happened near its embassy in Syria, killing a senior Iranian Revolutionary Guard figure there. The potential attack by Iran or its proxies on both Israel and the United States could escalate regional tensions sparked by the war in Gaza, a war that is now, as of today, in its 190th day. Each day it is prolonged is a day the threat of an attack on the U.S. or U.S. interests grows more severe. National correspondent Matt Gelka has a look at the group's U.S. intelligence is now zeroing in on.
Now, increasingly concerning is the potential for a coordinated attack here in the homeland, akin to the ISIS-K attack we saw at the Russia concert hall just a couple weeks ago.
A chilling warning from the FBI's Christopher Wray to Congress this week. The FBI director outlined the growing worldwide threats to America from terrorists around the world.
Organizations like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, express an intent to conduct attacks against us. It's something we need to take very seriously.
In the days after the March ISIS-K attack in Moscow that killed more than 130 people, Florida Senator Marco Rubio warned terrorists are moving through America's southern border.
There is a trafficking network out there that specializes in moving people. They do it for profit, moving people and migrants around the world, including across our southern border, who have links to ISIS.
A report this week revealed a man from Afghanistan on the terror watch list crossed the border illegally in 2023 and was apprehended, then released multiple times, including as recently as February. He has no restrictions on his movements until his ICE hearing in 2025. What does a potential attack look like? Experts say it likely wouldn't be on the scale of 9/11, but could come from a homegrown threat inspired by attacks abroad.
Since 9/11, the threats have been far more mundane and limited. Usually someone untrained picking up a gun and shooting people. There haven't even been that many bombings when it comes to jihadist attacks, at least compared to, say, the 1970s and 1980s in the United States. So the threats tend to be low level and local, and that's the primary focus of government agencies.
The FBI director told lawmakers that it's not time to panic, but it is time to be vigilant. And while there are no specific threats to the homeland, another cause for concern is that there could be attacks carried out on Americans abroad. For the National Desk in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka.
Matt, thank you. And petitioners in Colorado, they say they have enough signatures to get a state constitution amendment vote on abortion on the ballot in November. The threshold for a ballot initiative is just under 125 signatures, and the volunteers say they have more than 225,000 already. The names and signatures need to be verified. The deadline is April 18th. As many as 13 states could vote in November to make abortion an enshrined right. 4 states have already done so, and they have done that in various states across the country. Now, making a push for reproductive rights is Vice President Kamala Harris, who is in Arizona today, her second trip to the state this year. Earlier this week, you may remember the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of a ban on mostly all abortions there. Since Roe v. Wade was overturned, she's hosted over 80 events as part of her Fight for Reproductive Freedoms tour. The Missouri Senate voted last night to end child marriages. The measure goes to the state house now. It comes as Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin signed a law this week making it illegal for minors to get married even if they are emancipated. About 8,000 Virginians under the age of 18 got married between the years 2000 and 2021. That's according to data by Unchained at Last, an organization dedicated to ending child marriages. Virginia now joins 10 other states that does not allow minors to marry, but in 39 states with varying ages, children 17 or younger can get married with the consent of a parent or guardian. California, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Alabama do not even have a minimum age requirement, although there are bills in their state houses to change that, except when it comes to Alabama. Unchained at Last says that between 2000 and 2018, almost 300,000 minors were married in the United States. With inflation running hotter than hoped, economic worries are ramping up and continue to be a focus of the presidential campaign. National correspondent Janae Bowens has a look at how much more Americans are paying for goods and services since the pandemic hit.
Higher prices for everyday needs impact everyone.
Your total is...
Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows Americans are facing huge price hikes since February 2020, paying 20% more for milk, 30% more for bread, 50% more for eggs. Rent is up 20%, and electricity up 30%.
For every household, it's different.
Republican analysis from the Joint Economic Committee shows Americans are paying $23,760 more for household essentials since January 2021.
Particularly Americans on fixed incomes or people who don't have a locked-in mortgage at 2.5% like they got 5 years ago. That is going to be a more difficult, that's going to be a bigger problem.
And on top of that, gas prices are up. Friday's national average for a gallon of gas is $3.63. Around this time back in 2020, when demand plummeted due to the pandemic, the national average was $1.86.
It's, just expensive.
Despite the price hikes, President Joe Biden is defending his economic policies.
They just want to cut taxes for the wealthy and raise taxes on other people. And so I think they have no plan. Our plan is one I think is still sustainable.
But with numbers like these, it has Donald Trump's campaign asking voters,
Are you better off now than you were in January of 2021?
No, I'm not. I mean, that's me being honest. I'm working 5 times harder. When I calculate everything, hours worked to amount of money bringing in is nowhere near as high as it was.
And Trump doubling down in Atlanta earlier this week.
The number is out of control. Biden has no idea what the hell he's doing.
Now, Amira, a new survey from the University of Michigan shows consumer sentiment has slightly decreased since last month and has remained below pre-pandemic levels, something that could be a determining factor for who voters choose in November.
And Janae, the million-dollar question, what should we expect from the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, so President Biden says he predicts the Federal Reserve will issue an interest rate cut possibly before the end of the year. But reports show if the inflation situation worsens even further, the Fed may even have to consider raising rates. Of course, inflation numbers released earlier this week were higher than expected at 3.5%. Amira?
Getting harder and harder to predict what they're going to do. Janae Bowens, live from Washington, D.C. for us. Thank you. And coming up, the debate about free speech at universities heats up as a Republican congressman was shouted down on a college campus. We'll go inside the controversy. Then what you need to know about a recent Roku security breach that's impacting hundreds of thousands of users tonight. And later, a Texas man in custody for multiple felony charges, how women say he victimized them through dating apps. We'll be right back. House Speaker Mike Johnson and former President Donald Trump set to make a major announcement together at Mar-a-Lago today about election integrity. It's not the first time Johnson has visited the Florida estate. It comes as he confronts the threat of being ousted from his position. Johnson also plans to discuss a possible Ukraine aid package with Trump. That's according to CNN, citing sources familiar with the matter. More student loan forgiveness to the tune of $7.4 billion. That's how much debt will be canceled out for 277,000 borrowers. Those borrowers expected to get an email today notifying them of their loan discharges. A happy email many of them will be excited to see. The latest round of relief reflects a strategy to take smaller, targeted actions for subsets of borrowers that the Biden camp hopes will amount to a much more significant impact after a larger plan to wipe out more than $400 million in debt was struck down by the Supreme Court last year. With the latest batch of loan cancellations, the White House says it has forgiven $153 billion in debt for 4.3 million people. A prominent law professor is calling for the suspension of students who shouted down a Republican congressman on a Georgia college campus. Deplatforming speakers on college campuses has long been controversial. Is protesting speakers protected free speech, or does it simply deny someone else the right to free speech? The National Desk's Angela Brown takes a look at the debate.
The University of Georgia Turning Point USA chapter and college Republicans hosted Republican U.S. Representative Mike Collins. The congressman greeted by protesters. Take a listen.
How dare you come on this campus and exploit Laken Riley's death to push your xenophobic, fascist, racist agenda, trying to get immigrants kicked out of Georgia.
U.S. Representative Mike Collins authored the Laken Riley Act, which would require that migrants charged with certain crimes be detained. The House passed it last March. Police say Laken Riley was killed by a migrant who crossed the border illegally. During Collins' visit at UGA, protesters were walked out. Luke Winkler from Campus Reform was there.
We explained the format before of how the meeting works, and people still, they were there just to protest and yell at Collins specifically, and they all were related to Israel-Palestine conflict, the Laken Riley Act, and different profane language telling him to go die.
The University of Georgia student-led newspaper, The Red and Black, says Collins continued his speech on his immigration policy and took questions from the audience. Demonstrators continued to interrupt and were shown the door. This was a stark contrast to another event on UGA's campus on a controversial topic covered by The Red and Black. The same week that Collins was shouted down, the No Abortion, No Exceptions tour made a stop on campus. No reports so far of it being disrupted by protesters. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Well, drivers, listen up. The government is now investigating a Ford recall of nearly 43,000 Bronco Sport and Escape SUVs. Gas can leak from cracked fuel injectors onto hot engine compartment surfaces, posing a fire risk. Ford's solution is to install a tube to redirect the gasoline and a software update, but NHTSA says this does not fix the leaks and allows gas to end up below the vehicles. Roku is notifying customers that around 576,000 accounts were part of a recent security breach. The streaming service has said that it is likely the users' login credentials were taken from another source. The company added that some unauthorized purchases were made, less than 400, but credit card numbers were still secure. Roku reset the passwords of impacted accounts and reversed unauthorized charges. More and more renters are worried they'll never be able to buy a home. That's according to a new Redfin survey, where 38% of respondents said they believe they won't be able to, up from 27% last year. Of that group, 44% say it's because homes are too expensive. Some of the other reasons include down payment and maintenance costs, mortgage rates, and lack of available homes. A stinging loss for Amazon. Amazon Web Services has to pay out to tech company Cove $525 million for infringing on that company's patent rights. An Illinois federal jury found this week that AWS, the world's biggest cloud service provider, violated 3 of Cove's data storage technology patents. Cove said AWS now relies on the technology to manage large amounts of data. An Amazon rep said the company plans to appeal. Raising awareness about one of the most common gastrointestinal disorders. It's estimated that 10 to 15% of the world population is living with irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. The problem is many people dismiss it as just a stomach ache. Medical reporter Barbara Moore says that's a major reason why there's often a delay in a diagnosis.
It often takes up to 7 years for patients to get diagnosed because people just think exactly that. It's just a bellyache.
Dr. Melissa Murphy is the chief of surgery here at Kent Hospital on a mission to raise awareness about IBS.
Nobody wants to come in and talk about poop. Nobody wants to come in and talk about, that I hurt to go or I can't go.
But you should.
I think it's really important because, one, we want to make sure that it's not something even more serious, right? So we want to make sure it's not colon cancer or something else. And so it's really important just to talk to first your primary care physician, and they can do some general questions.
One of those questions would be, do you have abdominal pain at least once a week?
Associated with one other symptom. And the other 3 symptoms may be pain with having a bowel movement, a change in the frequency of the stool, or a change in the shape and the size of the stool.
Because there is no diagnostic test for IBS, it is all symptom-based. So if these symptoms persist at least 3 months and other conditions or diseases are ruled out, you may be diagnosed with this syndrome.
It's not going to progress to a cancer or something like that, but from a quality of life perspective, some studies have said that, I think patients with IBS have to change their activities at least every 73 days in order to deal with their symptoms. And so it really can impact their quality of life.
And it's not just quality of life. Dr. Murphy says studies show IBS costs billions of dollars in lost work hours. And while there's no cure, there are effective treatments, which is why you should have a conversation with your doctor sooner than later. I'm medical reporter Barbara Morse.
Good advice there, Barbara. Thank you. And coming up in Autism Awareness Month, how a barber in California is helping kids with the condition. Right after this. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
This whole time, I'm freaking out internally. I'm like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this situation?
Janitria Sedlock wanted us to hear her story about how she was victimized by a man she met on Tinder. Chong Yun Mounts was arrested by police in Selma, accused of multiple felony charges, including online impersonation and fraudulent use of identifying information. According to the arrest affidavit, Mounts is accused of meeting up with women that he matched with on Tinder. Then he would coerce them into giving him their password and Cash App information. The affidavit says he would then transfer money to his own accounts. He is also accused of sexual assault and theft.
That's good. That's a big milestone. What appears as a simple haircut by Elias Gonzalez, owner of Always Faded Barbershop in Fresno.
Many people, they don't see it as
anything, but it's huge.
Is actually making all the difference in the world for families like the Harakis. 3-year-old Isaiah has autism. Haircuts aren't usually this smooth.
To see Isaiah just sitting still, letting him cut his hair with the scissors, spraying, brushing, everything, and I know what a struggle it is for him, that's amazing.
For the month of April, Gonzalez is offering free haircuts Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays to children and adults living with autism.
Could coyotes follow a trail from the Grand Canyon State to the Beehive State?
The NHL would be a fool to not come to Salt Lake.
Senator Dan McKay does not have detailed information surrounding talks between Jazz owner Ryan Smith and the NHL, but McKay pushed the plan signed into law to entice professional hockey here.
The NHL would have screwed up if they don't come here.
In my opinion, that's absolutely correct.
So there's a possibility that the Arizona Coyotes could come to Utah.
That would be great.
Really?
I think so.
Well, coming up, who's in the lead on day 2 of the Masters Golf Tournament? Right after this. The sun is shining and winds are gusting at Augusta National for the second round of the Masters tournament. Bryson DeChambeau was the 18-hole leader after shooting an opening round 65. Perhaps no surprise coming with this competitive spirit.
Any event you're at, we're always trying to win. Like, we're not just going there to hit it around and have a hit and giggle. I mean, I'm trying to win every single golf tournament.
But lurking close behind is Scottie Scheffler. That's the 2022 Masters champion who's favored to win the whole thing. This time around, Scheffler has a little more on his mind than golf. His wife is very pregnant and due to give birth within the month. If she goes into labor, he says he'll leave at a moment's notice. Sounds like a good father to me. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us again for more coverage of America's top stories. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.